We will always be here to take care of you. That's what my daughter told me that morning. But what she really meant was, die well, old fool. My name is Richard Coleman and I am 71 years old. For over a year now, I've been confined to this bed in my suburban home on Maple Street, the same house where I raised 3 children and buried 1 wife. The cancer may have hollowed out my bones and stolen my strength, but it hasn't touched my mind or dimmed my eyes. That turned out to be both a blessing and a curse. The doctors gave me 6 months. That was 14 months ago. I suppose I'm too stubborn to die on schedule, much to the growing frustration of my loving family. They gather around my bedside with their practiced smiles and gentle touches, speaking in those hushed, reverent tones people reserve for the dying. Emily, my only daughter, brings me soup I can barely stomach. Michael stops by after work with updates about his law practice that I never asked for. David visits on weekends, always checking his phone, always somewhere else he needs to be. They think I'm fading. They think the morphine has made me soft and stupid. They're wrong. It started 3 weeks ago when I woke up to voices drifting up from the kitchen below. The old house carries sound like a confession booth, and my sons thought the closed door and my supposed stupor would protect their words. He can't last much longer, Michael was saying, his voice carrying that practiced authority he'd learned in law school. The house alone is worth $800,000, not counting the lake property. What about the medical bills? David asked. I could picture him there, probably still in his golf clothes, calculating numbers in his head like he did spreadsheets at the bank. Insurance covered most of it. Besides, he's been pretty tight with money his whole life. There's got to be at least $500,000 liquid, probably more. $500,000. They talked about my life's work like it was lottery winnings they were owed. I lay there in the dark, listening to my children divide up my existence with all the emotion of splitting a restaurant check. The betrayal cut deeper than the cancer ever could. Emily was more subtle but no less vicious. She would sit beside my bed, holding my hand, stroking my forehead with the tenderness of a loving daughter. But I caught the way she studied the room, her eyes lingering on my desk, on the safe behind the family photo, on the filing cabinet where I kept important papers. One afternoon, she brought her mother-in-law, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia who worked at First National. "Daddy's getting so forgetful," Emily said, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "Yesterday he couldn't remember where he put his checkbook. I worry about him managing his finances." Patricia nodded knowingly. At his age, with his condition, it might be wise to consider a joint account. For emergencies, you understand. Just to help him out. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed, while they discussed my incompetence. Emily squeezed my hand as they talked about power of attorney, about making things easier for me. The touch that should have comforted me felt like a snake coiling around my wrist. That night, I heard her whispering on the phone in the hallway outside my room. "He's definitely getting worse, Mom. Sometimes he just stares at nothing for hours. I think it's time we talk to Jim about the paperwork." Jim was their lawyer, a young man who'd never liked me much, probably because I'd questioned his inflated bills when he handled my wife's estate. "The sooner the better," came my daughter's voice, sharp and hungry. "I don't want him signing anything crazy in one of his confused moments." Confused moments. Is that what they called my grief, my silence, my retreat from a family that saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience with assets? The final revelation came on a Tuesday night when Martha, my caregiver, had gone home. Martha was a 60-year-old black woman from the south side of town who treated me with more genuine kindness than my own blood. She would read to me from the newspaper, help me with crossword puzzles, and never once looked at me like I was already dead. I was dozing when I heard all 3 of my children in the living room below. Their voices were louder now, less careful. Maybe they thought the distance and my medication would muffle their words. Maybe they just didn't care anymore. "We need to move faster," Emily was saying. "What if he changes his mind about something? What if he decides to give it all to charity or something crazy like that?" "Dad's not stupid," Michael replied. "He knows we're his kids. He knows we deserve it." Deserve it? The word hit me like a physical blow. "I still think we should talk to him about the lake house specifically," David added. "Make sure he knows how much it means to us, how we want to keep it in the family." The lake house. The cabin I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago, board by board, weekend by weekend. The place where I'd taught them to fish, where we'd had our best family vacations, where their mother and I had celebrated our 20th anniversary. They wanted to make sure I knew it meant something to them. What they meant was they wanted to make sure it stayed valuable. "He's been asking about Martha a lot lately," Emily said, and I heard the worry in her voice. "Keep saying she's good people. I hope he doesn't get any ideas about being generous with the help." "Martha." The woman who had shown me more genuine care in 6 months than they had in 6 decades. The woman who stayed late when I had bad nights, who brought me books from her own collection, who treated me like a human being instead of a dying bank account. That's when I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I asked Emily to call Dr. Harrison. I told her I was feeling stronger, wanted to review some financial matters while my head was clear. She practically glowed with excitement, probably thinking I was ready to start signing papers. Instead, I asked her to contact my old friend William Patterson. Bill and I had served in Vietnam together, gone to college on the GI Bill, stood at each other's weddings. He'd been practicing estate law for 40 years, and unlike Jim, he actually gave a damn about his clients. "Are you sure you don't want to use Jim?" Emily asked, her voice tight with barely concealed panic. "He's already familiar with the family situation." "Bill knows me better," I said, letting my voice sound weak and tired. "Known him longer than anyone. I trust him." That afternoon, while Emily ran errands and my sons were at work, I had the most honest conversation I'd had in months. Bill came to the house with his briefcase and his keen eyes, and I told him everything. Every conversation I'd overheard, every false kindness, every greedy calculation. "Jesus, Richard," he said when I finished. "I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." "Don't be sorry," I told him. "Help me fix it." We worked for 3 hours, completely rewriting my will. The house would go to Michael, but with a catch. It couldn't be sold for 10 years, and he had to maintain it as a rental property, with all proceeds going to the local children's hospital. David would get the lake house, but only if he spent at least 4 weeks there every year for the next 5 years. If he failed to meet that condition, it would go to the state park system. Emily would inherit my stock portfolio, but it was all tied up in a trust that would only pay out small amounts annually. The bulk of my liquid assets, nearly $700,000, would be split between 3 charities and Martha, who would receive a lump sum of $100,000 in lifetime health insurance. "They're going to contest this," Bill warned me. "Let them try," I said. "You've got recordings of our conversations. I'm going to document everything I've seen and heard. Let them explain to a judge why they deserve money from a man they treated like a burden." The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to walk into it. It took another 2 weeks. Emily had been pushing harder about the financial paperwork, bringing Jim by for friendly visits that felt more like depositions. She'd started talking about Dad's good days and bad days, and how important it was to take care of business while he's still lucid. On a gray Thursday afternoon, they all arrived together. Emily, Michael, David, and Jim the lawyer, armed with papers and that particular blend of fake concern and barely contained excitement that I'd come to recognize. "Dad," Emily said, settling into the chair beside my bed with the documents in her lap, "we've been thinking about your future, about making sure everything is taken care of properly. We just want to help, Dad," Michael added, ever the attorney even with his own father. "Make things easier for you." Jim opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "These are just some basic documents, Mr. Coleman. Powers of attorney, some account management papers. Nothing complicated." They thought they had me. 3 children and a lawyer, surrounding a dying old man in his bedroom, ready to strip him bare with legal papers and loving smiles. I let them talk for 5 minutes, outlining their generous offer to help manage my affairs. I nodded weakly, asked a few confused questions about terms I'd understood perfectly for 50 years. I played the part of the helpless old fool they needed me to be. Then I looked up at Emily, my only daughter, the child I'd carried on my shoulders, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd gladly paid. "You know what's funny, sweetheart?" I said, my voice suddenly stronger than it had been in months. She leaned forward, probably thinking I was about to thank her for her devotion. "What's that, Daddy?" I heard everything. Every conversation, every plan, every greedy little scheme. The words came out clear and sharp, cutting through their shocked silence like a blade. "Did you really think the medicine made me deaf?" The color drained from Emily's face. Michael stepped backward like I'd slapped him. David's mouth actually fell open. "I heard you dividing up my money before I was even dead," I continued, sitting up straighter in bed than I had in weeks. "I heard you planning to take control of my accounts. I heard you dismiss Martha like she was nothing, when she's shown me more love than the 3 of you combined." "Dad, you don't understand," Emily started, but I cut her off. "I understand perfectly. You thought you were dealing with a dying fool. But the only fool here was me, for believing that my own children actually cared whether I lived or died." That's when the doorbell rang. "That'll be my lawyer," I said, enjoying the way their faces went from pale to gray. "The real one." Bill Patterson walked into that room like an avenging angel, briefcase in hand, professional smile cutting through their panic like a scythe. He nodded politely to Jim, who was frantically shuffling papers back into his case. "Good afternoon, everyone," Bill said. "Richard, are you ready to review the new documents?" Emily found her voice first. "New documents?" "Oh yes," I said, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed with more energy than I'd shown in months. "Didn't I mention? I've been making some changes. Lots of changes." Bill opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The new will and testament of Richard Coleman, properly witnessed and notarized. "Would you like me to read it aloud?" The silence in that room was deafening. I could almost hear their dreams of easy money crashing down around them. "The short version," I said, looking each of my children in the eye, "is that your greed just cost you about $600,000. Martha gets more money than any of you, and every penny comes with conditions that'll make your lives interesting." Emily was crying now, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage, of humiliation, of pure financial loss. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already did," I replied. "And if you try to contest it, Bill has recordings of everything I heard you say. Every greedy word, every cruel calculation, every moment you treated your dying father like a prize to be claimed." Michael, the lawyer, knew it was over. I could see it in his face, the recognition that they'd been outmaneuvered by the old man they'd underestimated. David was the first to leave, storming out without a word. Emily followed, still crying, still angry. Michael lingered for a moment, maybe hoping for some last-minute mercy. "I'm disappointed in you, son," I told him quietly. "All of you." He left without responding. Jim tried to salvage something from the wreckage, but Bill sent him packing with a few well-chosen legal phrases that made it clear any contest would be both expensive and futile. When the house was quiet again, Bill sat down in the chair Emily had vacated. "Feel better?" he asked. "I feel like I'm ready to die properly now," I said. "With dignity. Surrounded by people who actually care about me." Martha arrived an hour later for her evening shift. I told her about her inheritance, about the health insurance, about how she'd never have to worry about money again. She cried then too, but her tears were different. They were tears of gratitude, of disbelief, of genuine love. "Mr. Richard," she said through her tears, "you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I told her. "You've been more family to me than my own family. You deserve every penny." I lived another 4 months after that day. Long enough to see my children's lawyers give up on contesting the will. Long enough to see Martha put a down payment on a little house near her grandchildren. Long enough to know that the charities I'd chosen would put my money to good use. The children visited less frequently after the will reading. When they did come, the pretense was gone. No more fake smiles, no more gentle touches, no more talk of taking care of me. At least it was honest. Emily came by one last time the week before I died. She sat in that same chair, but the warm facade had been replaced by cold distance. "I hope you're satisfied," she said. "I am," I told her. "For the first time in over a year, I actually am." She left and I never saw her again. But Martha was there at the end, holding my hand, reading to me from the newspaper, treating me like a human being instead of a disappointment or a jackpot. She was there when I closed my eyes for the last time, and her tears were real. That's how a man should die. Not surrounded by vultures waiting for the feast, but held by someone who actually gives a damn whether he draws another breath. I died well, despite what my daughter had wished for me. I died knowing that love isn't about blood or obligation, but about the daily choice to treat another person with dignity and care. Martha had made that choice every day for 6 months. My own children had chosen differently. In the end, that made all the difference.